So I got Invoked in front of you. This is the Shadolll variant. I think this is probably the third strongest deck. But before I get into this and what cards I think Konami can try to touch, and they're definitely not going to touch a bunch of cards, maybe just one or two. But let me go through like what I think the five decks are because I don't think I went over it. So one would be probably Dragon Link, two is Dinosaur, three is some kind of Dogmatica Invoked Shadolll deck, and then four and five is probably like Prank Kids and Eldritch. So going by that, and then everything after that is just a rogue deck to me. I think Eldritch is probably rogue deck. Prank Kids probably just a little better than that. But thinking about that, thinking about what cards are going to drop and even the megatins what they're trying to sell, because most of the time when you're trying to think about the ban list you should definitely think about what Konami's trying to push, because that's what's important, that's what a business tries to do. But let's get on with the first card, Nadir's Servant. I think Nadir's Servant's one of the strongest let me think. Yeah, Nadir's Servant is probably the strongest spell in this deck. What it does is send one monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. You could add any Dogmatica monster that has the attack or less than the monster you sent. So it just gives you Ecclesia or Fleur or what's Maximus. This card's just crazy because this is almost like Engage. This is Engage level of power. You're +2. It's literally a +2. In this deck, you could send the Shadolll cards to hit that engine. I think this card's crazy. But I know a lot of people do want to see this card to 1. My issue is I don't think they're going to do it because this card never saw play in when there was like real tournaments. I think they still want to see that maybe when like towards the end of the year they'll hit this, and especially because I think this card's gonna be one of the selling points for the megatins as well. I know Droplets I believe is getting reprinted, but I think they're gonna try to reprint this as well. So I think they'll hit it after it gets a reprint. Konami likes doing that, so I don't think this is gonna be the hit. I do think this is probably the strongest card in the deck, and the there's no other deck that can abuse Nadir's Servant like the Invoke deck really can. So this is definitely on my radar. But my issue is, well, like I said, they're trying to push product. They're definitely going to try to sell a reprint of this. So probably not, but definitely the strongest card. ALEISTER and Magical Meltdown would be the other two cards I would like to talk about. I think one of these two can go to 1. I would preferably want Meltdown to go to 1. I've seen so many decks that just lose their field spell to 1, but I don't need to see ALEISTER at 1 because like ALEISTER at 1 is kind of weird. I know OCG did it for a bit, like that was just weird to me. I think that actually cripples the deck. Meltdown at 1 is fine because I hated when the Invoke deck just sees all their broken spells. If they see Servant, Meltdown, and like the Shadolll Fusion, I'm just like, oh, I just lose the game. I think most decks would lose at those combinations of cards, so I just want to see them not be able to open that, especially because now they're all playing Prosperity. It feels like it's always an uphill battle against this deck unless you're playing like Dragon Link, and even if you're playing Dragon Link, they sometimes just still can play through because these spells are just so strong. I want to see one of them get hit. That's why I had Nadir's Servant there. Meltdown can also be there. I don't think ALEISTER needs to be, but I know a few people have talked about ALEISTER to 1. I think that's a little too much, but Meltdown is actually crazy. I've seen so many field spells just get hit to 1. If Light Stage is a 1, Meltdown can go to 1. So that's my argument right there. And then the final card would be something from the extra deck. I think everybody hates this card. Winda is literally crazy. You can only special summon once. It's a Floodgate on legs. Floodgate on legs is never good for the game. I think it's very easy to get to this card. Shadolll Fusion just lets you use cards from your deck to make this. I think either to 1 or even ban, because the other Shadolll Fusions are actually good. Like Apkalone Construct, like this deck grinds so much. If you're playing a slower deck, I think Shadolll just overwhelms you because this deck creates so much advantage. It's really hard to deal with the set monsters. I think this deck plays very differently than other decks, and people really underestimate how much advantage this deck can generate. This deck by far generates the most advantage out of like the big 5. Maybe Prank Kids kind of come close to it, but I still think this deck's better. I think this deck is really crazy. These are some of the cards that you can definitely hit. Shadolll, Winda, Meltdown, not Alice, maybe ALEISTER, and then Nadir's Servant. Like I said, I don't think you need to hit a bunch of these. I think you just need to hit like one card, just a slap on the wrist, just because this deck is getting so popular. It's a very easy deck, especially after a list. If nothing gets touched, this is like the first deck everybody goes to because it's so simple, it's so good, it's so strong, it's reliable. Everything it does is strong. All the spells are so crazy. I could even make an argument for Super Poly to get hit because I think this deck abuses the hell out of Super Poly. Super Poly is crazy. So let me know if there's other cards you guys would think about hitting, but these are the cards I would definitely think about touching. Stay tuned for more. Subscribe, like.